Welcome to the Open Era Podcast. My name is Devang Desai, and I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Simon Bushel Bush. You escaped from Vancouver just in time to miss the Laver Cup. How fortuitous for you.
Perfect timing. Someone said I did it on purpose. No, not exactly. It's nice. I'm attending a wedding this weekend, but it is somewhat sad. I kind of wanted to be at the Laver Cup. I wanted to see what the world's elite gathering in Vancouver would have looked like.
Yeah, and I think it's a bit weirder this time around. Obviously, last year was a big deal for a lot of reasons, including the cry fest at the end and the concert, but more importantly, Roger Federer walking away from tennis, playing with Nadal and Novak Djokovic there too. This time around, Fed is there, but he is in that firm ambassador role. I think they were talking about him being the captain one day for Europe, which I mean, like, yeah, man, if you made this tournament, you probably have to do those things going forward. So
it's also interesting to see just like for lack of better terminology, a sort of plastic event that's been manufactured and is completely made up and has very little like prestige or backing, especially with a tournament that is still trying to manufacture its own history. They're doing a lot of work here with a lot of money to try and add a level of prestige to this tournament. Is it working for you?
I'll be honest, I haven't watched very much of this tournament live this weekend. And I mean, last year, I was fully glued to this. I mean, like we all were. So obviously the stakes are different. I thought it being in Canada would pull on some nationalistic heartstrings just a bit, but I'm glad they haven't. Maybe that's a good sign for me that I'm not so easily roped into these things. But yeah, I don't know. I think the way the calendar is already so jam-packed and the way we had literally players involved in the tournament being like, how serious is this? Like live on court was an excellent, I think, kind of glimpse into how unsure people are with how to take this tournament or where to take this tournament and how serious it is. If it's an exhibition, I refer to that Felix Auger-Aliassime, Gael Monfils match, in which I think you can clearly see Gael kind of thinking this is an exo. I was invited here to play for Europe. I'm having to have a good time. And you have Felix playing for his life in front of his home fans, which, yeah, it made it kind of strange. And I definitely wonder what they do going forward. I mean, at the very least, opening this up across genders is the start here. But yeah, I don't know. It's been strange.
Also, everyone else pulled out as well. And it's made it for a very lukewarm reception. I think how much of this as well is revolving around the novelty of it for the first few years and whether or not we've kind of reached that tipping point where it's not that interesting anymore on the basis that none of the big three are really participating a huge amount in this one. And I think historically it came from the idea of being able to see Novak and Roger playing doubles together and in a combination of any of the big three, and that's no longer the case here. So we're left with Andrei Rublev against Ben Shelton, which is fine. Sure.
Why not? Why not?
Absolutely.
Ben Shelton trying to like make fully NCAA-fy that moment with Felix. I love though. He's just like getting into his ear and being like, "Don't let him challenge you, bro. You got this." It was maybe the highlight, which I don't know. It doesn't say much, but also shouts to Team World, who I think are finally going to win this thing because, as we've seen in the past, that's been hard. Yeah, I don't have much to say about the Laver Cup, though I did want to touch on that awkwardness regarding how serious people are taking it. But I think overall, it's a good way to start this week's episode because we're going to kind of jump around a few different places.
I will say on this one, it's an interesting thing that exists across tennis as well, which is that you just have way too much all the time in the sport. And we are 2 weeks removed from the last Grand Slam of the year. And also, this thing happens every single year. So it's hardly surprising that a level of fatigue sets in at an event like this, where there's not even any time for everyone to really harness, whatever it is. Distance make the heart grow fonder, that kind of idea, where this is not the Ryder Cup or the Solheim Cup or any of the equivalents where you actually have a couple of years to kind of gather your thoughts and get going again. This is just relentless, and it kind of has lost a little bit of the spark for me here.
Oh, major apologies to Team World as well, because they, of course, won last year. Who could forget the final
Jesus.
score, 13-8. I forgot the last day. They ran riot. Novak
You mean
lost. Seth
Roger,
lost.
the Roger
Rogers.
Federer retirement invitational.
God, that was sad. Though, I do remember people were like, look how much Novak cares, and like everyone's friends. And it was just for a brief moment. I think that aspect of that tournament will stand out in our memories for a long time just because it was extra weird. But yeah, I think we're risking it kind of become this pseudo important event that's not really important unless like we have sponsors telling us it's important kind of thing, which I think we see quite a bit in the sport.
Nail on the head, right? This is important for sponsors, probably not for the players.
Speaking of cup tournaments and Davis Cup stuff, we touched on it a bit last week. We recorded midweek, so we can confirm now who has made the final 8. And shouts to Canada as well, considering the injuries they were dealing with. The youngsters, Galarneau and Diallo, really showing up, and Vasek Pospisil always showing up for Canada. But Simon, the final 8 are confirmed. No Spain in Malaga for this final 8, which is where, of course, this is being hosted. Which I think it's once again something that we've been talking about, where you've lost the home element of the Davis Cup. But it's interesting. Like, we had a listener write in, Nina Lettinen, write in about Finland stunning Group D and like causing one of the, I would say, biggest shocks in recent Davis Cup history, considering the group they were in with the United States, Croatia, and the Dutch. To come through that group and make the final 8 was awesome. And I think they rightfully were wanting a shout out for that achievement. And I think that is awesome. And I think also seeing Great Britain, Bush, rally and people like Dan Evans becoming not national heroes, but like big deals for at least one weekend and fulfilling all of his talent in a pretty big stage in Manchester. Like, in some ways, I thought it was still really good and still why I like the Davis Cup, but it also feels like with each further iteration of this, we're moving farther away from the truth. And I think it's going to be weird during the final 8 that there's no home country, and it's really going to be up to traveling people to make the atmosphere what Davis Cup should be.
You heard it here, Devang Desai, Davis Cup truther, officially on the record here. I think all the things you said and the points that were made here are indicative of the fact that there is still something here, isn't there? And the fact that the Davis Cup is still a good event. Well, I think let's separate that, right? There's the Davis Cup, which is the current version of it, and then there's the Davis Cup, which you want the more broad version of it, the historic version of it. And clearly, like, there's a reason that it has ran for as long as it has done and has like the backing and the history that it has done in general. It's because the idea of nations competing against each other and the atmosphere that comes with it and the format, all of that stuff I think is really, really exciting and makes for a really good event across the course of the season and the way that it shakes out. This is just a sort of confusing mess still. And I don't think we need to go over old ground right on this one, which is that we've been very, very against what this has become. But then you find situations where you do have that Finland result and you're reminded that, oh yeah, this has still got some legs in it and it's still quite cool. One of the things that I will say about the Davis Cup, though, which I do find interesting, is there's no more perfect personification of what the Davis Cup has become than the current version of the website, where it hasn't actually loaded who is in the quarterfinal stages.
God help you if you try to find a live score on the Davis Cup website. You are effed. There's no way you're finding that. Maybe from 26. I've known the archive section on their website is fantastic, but unless you're looking for 2016 live stats, you're kind of out of luck.
Currently, the quarterfinal stages is listed as undefined versus undefined. So,
isn't it all really though? When you think about it,
love it.
Yeah. I mean, some could say Novak showing up for this is because he didn't want to go to the Laver Cup, and he did an actual excuse, like an actual home written letter to the principal, being like, "Yeah, he actually has something else going on, so he can't go." But he's obviously a huge member of that Serbian team, and he's repeatedly showed up. But like things like that, Bush, like where he's coming up right after the U.S. Open is done, after he's won this, and he's like, "Yeah, I'll play and lose doubles again, like I always do, ha ha ha." But I'm still doing it because I know back. Like I think that still lends its cachet to the relevancy of this tournament. But yeah, it's been peakified. we don't have to cover too much old ground, but shouts to Finland for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout outs to Finland for what they've achieved here. I do think there's an interesting wrinkle in tennis in the way that perhaps there isn't in other team sports as well. The fact this is an individual sport, and so much of this is tied in with federation funding. And not just federation funding, federation backing as well. So oftentimes you have players playing for their nation who, let's say, do not have the greatest of relationships with the actual federation that they're playing under, which is wildly hilarious. I mean, we can also make that case in football and every other sport, because there are players that don't seem to get along with the federation that they are part of. Looking at you, Spain, at the moment. But it is quite fascinating when it's in a singles event.
I was reading something, Rohan Bopana, legendary Indian player, specialist in doubles, made the run at the US Open just recently, but he was talking about like the Indian team and how like the vibes are way worse now, and nobody really gets on, or no one's really like supporting each other, and how it's made the Davis Cup not what it used to be. And he was referring like other situations where people were showing up no matter what and pulling out of challenger events to come play Davis Cup because they were asked to, and like that was the level of commitment. But it's just no longer like that, and it's a bit more individualized. And I think between that and like maybe the Sinner stuff, and obviously Yannick Sinner's had a hilariously long season and played way too much, so I totally back him taking time. But I think there's like this idea as well that this sport is even more individualized now, in terms of like looking out for yourself and looking out for your future earnings and longevity and all this stuff. Because we've seen some people not shoot out, but like they've had some pretty rapid ascents, only to be met with equally rapid falls. So I get why players are looking out for themselves, but I do think a lot of the changes that have made this less about the whole country versus country aspect, which was the whole point. So we have like 8 of these competitions now. We should be able to merge them into something a little more cohesive and sensible, I would think, but we'll see.
Well, just let's take a step back for a second and evaluate the past 2 weeks. If you're a casual tennis fan and you have the Davis Cup one week and then literally the fucking Laver Cup the next week,
like, what's going on here?
Like, please explain to me how this is supposed to work and what I'm supposed to be following. What should I rank in terms of priority and prestige? It doesn't really make a lot of sense.
We'll touch on what happened on the ATP and WTA in parting shots, but we did miss some stuff that ended last week. Bush, you wanted to touch on Ashlyn Kruger.
Ashlyn Kruger winning in Osaka. This is interesting of note because she is the second youngest US player inside of the world's top 100. I think she, by winning that tournament, jumped quite significantly. I think she's in the 70s now, and she's just 19. She has a huge game. I think the overall evaluation on her is that she is basically baby Rybakina, and I think she's going to be a really good player, Dev. I think she's already a really good player, but keep an eye on her because she's got an enormous game, and I think it's going to translate well to the top of the women's game.
Baby Bach, can we get those shirts going? I think it makes perfect sense. 73, I think, Bush now. 6'1" as well. That Rybakina frame, fascinating. That swing that is now restarted because the WTA is like, we're going back to Asia and we're good with everything. I think it's fascinating to see as well, the level of, and I think we'll touch on this as well, but Wang also made a run here in Osaka into the semis, and then she ended up winning Wang Xiyu, but a ton of Chinese representation amongst the latter stage finalists in Japan and then in China the next week. Also, Bush, quickly, Barbara Krejcikova beating Sofia Kenin in the San Diego Open final. I'm not going to call it a weird year for Barbara Krejcikova, in which like she just wasn't as good on the singles side, which I think is normal probably for most players, but she had just been able to maybe pull off the double so regularly that we expected it to continue. But I mean, she won in Dubai, but overall, probably not her best year. This is a nice one.
Well, she just won the 5th major, didn't she, in San Diego? Just giving out the fielders.
Doubles title in Australia too. It's like, this is a good year, a great year for most. But I feel like the Barb that was making huge runs in 2021, this is a bit more back to the level.
Are you saying that the bar has been set high?
Oh, Jesus. I'll move on as quickly as I can from that. Anything else, Simon, that as we play kind of catch up here before we get into parting shots and what happened this week?
Well, I mentioned that it's challenging, I think, for a casual fan to understand what's going on in the certainly in team competitions, right? When you have Laver Cup and Davis Cup sort of back to back. I think you could also make the case in the WTA and ATP side of things that we are just a couple of weeks removed from that final major of the year, and we're still going hell for leather, to use a British term here. Like we really are. We're going tournament. We're going hot and heavy.
Hammer and tongs, as they say.
Throw as many as you can at the wall on this one. Jesus, baby in bathwater. How many tournaments have taken place in the last 2 weeks, and how much is coming up in the next little while as well? I know you got to make your money where you can do as these tours, but I mean, goodness me, it's hard to keep track of what's going on for us, let alone people who are trying to follow it. And also just putting into context as well of what exactly from a tour perspective are you trying to keep eyes on? Like, what do you want from a narrative perspective, and why is this section of the tour actually important? Because I think to anyone else, it just kind of seems like a bunch of also-rans playing, and that's clearly not the case, just given some of the results that we've seen over the last few weeks. But then looking at it coming up, it's just a big kind of hodgepodge of everything, and it's a bit of I still shake my head, and I still wonder what on earth is happening.
Yeah, no, I feel like we've had this discussion a few times, and we will end up having an episode on how these calendars really make sense, but it's a bit nuts. And yeah, I feel like it's totally up to you as the tennis consumer how you want to do this post US Open swing. And I totally understand the people who swear off the Laver Cup entirely and don't even recognize it, and maybe even for that matter the Davis Cup based on and what it is now. But I think at this point it's truly seeking out your faves and seeing how they've done. Like I feel like for this week I kind of gravitated towards Maria Sakkari and like how she was doing, and that to me was what I stayed up on. And what it meant was that I ended up following Guadalajara more than the other tournaments, to the point where I really wasn't sure what was happening on the ATP side until I saw Andy and Aslan and some familiar names. So I think for me now, it's like, all right, who's the story I'm going to key in on? And by circumstance, that tournament I'm going to key on because of the person. And it ended up working out this week, but it is a bit of a crapshoot, man.
Andy and Aslan. If that is not the name of a children's book,
we should. I know that was pick number 3 on the podcast name list. Damn, that's good stuff, right? Okay, we'll leave it there. When we come back, I mentioned Guadalajara. We'll talk Sakkari. We'll talk Wang Xiyu. We'll talk wherever the hell the ATP is also this week. They're in China as well, in a couple different places, plus some more in parting shots coming up next. Welcome back to the Open Air Podcast. It's time for Parting Shots, the new hybrid version of Parting Shots. So we still get into quite a bit of tourist scuttlebutt and talk about what's happened. Simon, one of the more uplifting things I've seen on a tennis court in 2023 happened this weekend. I can firmly say that, and for that I feel grateful.
Oh, what a setup.
Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, do you know what I'm talking about?
Is it the phone celebration? No,
it's not. It's Sakk. It's the Sakk attack. It's Maria Sakkari winning in Mexico. Boy, we talked a hell of a lot about this player, Simon, and we talked about how much we like her generally, and how much we kind of vibe with her spirit, and seeing the behind the scenes stuff on Netflix was really illuminating in terms of some of the demons she's battling and some of the things off the court that's affecting her. But I think overall it's been, holy cow, this year has been bad for her and not what we would have hoped. And even the runs that she did make in Indian Wells and Madrid ended rather poorly and sadly. So I think for her to win in Mexico, Simon, in Guadalajara, and see the emotion on her face and how much it meant to her. Like, I know there's a ton of cliches you can throw out here when you just like what it means and like this is what it's all about. But holy cow, you could really see it on her face.
Yeah, I mean, put it this way. Coming into this tournament, she'd won 2 matches in the last 5 tournaments that she'd entered. So it's a good indication of where the level had been. This tournament is kind of fascinating because it has 1,000 status as well, because this actually goes down as a massive win in the course of her season and in terms of ranking points and everything as well. So I'm pleased for her in that regard. The emotional journey that she's been on since basically that French Open, do you want to say? Should we say that French Open? Let's say that and then sort of walk it back from there. It's been kind of astonishing, really, because this, for all the world, looked like a player that was going to cross the line and cross the threshold and become a Grand Slam champion. And then it kind of just all melted away. And I think to get as close as she has been and to still have the mental fortitude to keep going is quite strong. I mean, it's astonishing, really, to think about it, just seeing from what we have from behind the scenes. I guess to put a sort of metaphor for this, is Maria Sakkari the Tottenham Hotspurs of the tennis tour?
Jesus Christ. The Postecoglou, I guess there's a slight link there. I think, I saw, I'm just not even going to touch this.
Just keep
disgust me entirely. And so the quote afterwards in the presser, I thought this is really good. So she's talking about like just the horrific mention she's getting and like the DMs during this really bad stretch. And you can imagine they're awful because we see some players post them every now and then. But here's her answer to this question. We live in 2023. Social media is a part of our everyday life. You cannot avoid it. Coco said she knows their usernames. I know them too. I know the person with the YouTube channel who posts all my semifinal losses, all my final losses. I'm aware. The satisfaction now, I cannot describe it. When you prove all these people wrong, it's fuel. For me, it worked as fuel. I knew it was going to come. I didn't know when. Thank you to them. They gave me strength. I thought that was a banger. And then I think this is Courtney Nguyen who asked, well, you sound like Daniil Medvedev. And she said, he's someone I look up to. He's very clever and he's very intelligent. F the haters seems to be the slogan. That's what all the cool kids are saying, Simon, and it checks out. Dude, do you know whose YouTube channel is that? Do you know who that is?
Spoilers, it's ours. I guess the real question is what is expectations for Maria Sakkari? I think that's really one of the ones that's interesting to sort of hone in on here, because you look at the number next to her name and the ranking and everything else, and you sort of look at it and say, yeah, she's not done really anything at Grand Slam level at all, but she's still a competitive top 20 tennis player. And is that acceptable for a player like this, or the expectations much, much higher? Because I think if you just look at this as her being 20th in the world, then this is not a bad season for her.
Yeah, exactly.
I think if you look at anything other than that, or perhaps a level setting for her being slightly lower than that, then I think priorities can shift a little bit here. But in general, I suspect she sees herself as the world number 5 as opposed to the world number 20. Yeah,
that's a good question. I mean, I feel like she's suffered a bit from her inflated ranking when it comes to, like, it's not a good indicator of where her game is at. I mean, she didn't make it out of the first round, had a slam after Melbourne, bunch of second round exits, some third round exits, and then to win here. I mean, this was one of the big titles, and you mentioned, Simon, it's one of the 1,000 events, but like, it's not. She made the final year last year and lost, so I think for that reason, this is a potential monkey off her back. I'm okay now. I don't really need to care what other people think. I need to work on what's been helping me. And it seems like a lot of the things that she's been doing off the court, though the results have been taking a while to come, they're working now. So I do feel like this could be a potential. I'm going to play free. I don't really care that much about expectations. And maybe that results in a few more of these, because I do think, like, on the scale of getting tight, ruining your matches, or like, she's got to be up there, right? Like, in terms of watching someone visibly get tight and kind of ship it. I feel like I've seen that more from her, and this is anecdotally, than most from the top players.
What form of performance enhancing, not performance enhancing, what sort of mind altering substances do we need to put Maria Sakkari on to chill out?
I mean, winning. Maybe it's just this. Maybe winning now. But
look at that.
Yeah.
A seasoned pro. He doesn't even take the bait.
I will quickly mention a bunch of stuff in China happening, Simon. So I think we're back. We're back. We never left, you could say, but we're back. Wang winning in Guangzhou, beating Magda Linette. It's a Discord joke for all you lovely Discord people out there. But yeah, I mentioned a very solid couple of weeks for Chinese players, but they also won the doubles at this event as well in Guangzhou. And then on the ATP side, Simon, Chengdu, Zhuhai, both still going on as we're recording this. But I was a bit taken aback maybe by how many quote unquote top players decided to make the trip this early for this, including your Andy Murray's. So I know top player is by name only, but the calculus for post US Open has changed once again, because there will be some pretty posh appearance fees slashed these people's ways following the US Open that will bring them way farther out preemptively for this Asian swing.
I think it will, yeah. And you didn't mention in that one as well that Beijing's next week as well. So you have some pretty big events coming up in regards to pay packets and all the things that are gonna go along with that. I think I come back to my previous point on this one, which is that how close we are to that final major of the season, and really just trying to find an audience for this stuff, or trying to find a narrative which works in the wider season, because I think it sure feels like there's no importance to this outside of the individual players and to potentially the city that these events are in. And maybe that's fine, right? Maybe just from the perspective of it matters to the city, it matters to the players that are there, and to the fans that are in attendance in those local markets, then that's okay. But I mean, more broadly, if you're trying to sell this as a tour or trying to follow it as a story throughout the year, it just makes no sense.
I think where it's lining up is that we'll have that major, that fifth real major, like happen towards early November, end of October, maybe even middle November, and it'll be in Saudi Arabia. That's my big bet, Simon. The way this is lined up and the way you have Shanghai and Beijing back, I think you could potentially shoehorn another major into that November month, and I could see them trying maybe.
I could also see that as well. We've still got a little time left in 2023 for our predictions to come through.
True. But I feel like this one is just whatever they call it and whatever it's actually declared, fifth major, Saudi Masters 1000, who knows? But the purse will be insane, and it'll be, yeah. Anyways, that's for our end of year show, probably.
That is the end of year show. I'm just going to take cues on the fact that, remember when the Royal Rumble went to Saudi Arabia?
Yes.
And it was called, was it called the biggest Royal Rumble or the Royalist Rumble or something ridiculous?
Something like that, yeah.
Ultimate Rumble? I can't remember what it's called. Something ridiculous anyway. What is one above a Grand Slam? That's really what I'm wondering. Is an Ultra Slam a Mega Slam?
Ultra Slam, Jesus. I mean, yeah, they all sound upsetting. But yeah, here we go, baby, the future. The UTS, Simon, also happened. Please tell me what happened.
Well, you can add another one to those lists of Davis Cup and Laver Cup happening back to back. The UTS also happened. So if you want to open up that grab bag of tournaments, different things that are going on, and pull out something, this also did occur. It took place in Frankfurt. It was won by Andrei Rublev, going under the moniker of this one as Rublo. We'll just leave that one sitting there for a second. I don't know what to make of this anymore, Dev. Apparently it was actually fairly well attended from what I understand about it, and it actually was a relatively entertaining event. The lineup of people that were here, though, hodgepodge of people. We had Gael Monfils doing double duty going back and forth. We had Chris Eubanks, Dimitrov, Benoit Paire, Diego Schwartzman, Struff, Casper Ruud. Casper Ruud making this list as well, the Iceman. Of all the list of nicknames that I could have come up with, Casper Ruud, the Iceman is not one of them. What would your nickname have been for him?
Oh God, I'm still taken aback by Grigor being called G Unit, which is maybe to take on how old he is, because he was coming up when 50 Cent and G Unit were still name brand. Casper Ruud, the Iceman. I mean, do you think he called himself that? Do you think he sent that into the team there? The Thunder, Johnny Leonard Struff, is also kind of vague enough. The Rebel, Benoit Paire. I think Rublo is sadly the best one here. I'm not sure what I would call Casper Ruud. Maybe the Rude Man.
Rude Boy, perhaps.
Rude Boy. Oh God, that's way better.
Rublo is actually quite good. I feel like if I was seeing him in the locker room, I'd probably call him Rublo.
If we were friends, I would definitely be calling him Rublo for sure.
And we will from now on.
Moving on, the phone celebration. It's crossing barriers, Simon.
Have you been following this ridiculousness? So obviously, like, we have the Djokovic stuff with him, the phone being hung up.
I'm seeing now every Tom, Dick, and Harry is now employing it whenever they feel disrespected, perhaps. I feel like that's the last time I saw it. There was a similar instance, right?
Is this the tennis equivalent of the ice bucket challenge / planking / dabbing / what else am I missing? Come on down. There must have been some other things. Mannequins, the mannequin challenge.
I mean, yeah, it's all of those things. But I saw Musetti did it, but why did he do it that time? Just because? Oh, because people were talking smack that he made the team or something?
Sure, absolutely. Lorenzo Musetti announcing that him and his partner are having a child as well this week, which is kind of cool.
Fanini did it too. Okay, and apparently now they're all just like, we love this celebration, and it seems cool to do. So
it's very reminiscent of very early 2000s Budweiser commercial of What's Up. If you remember that era of things. Also, like, just touching on all of those different like social media trends that people have chased over the years. Is there anything that's more aggressively 2010s than like...
Yeah, well, I mean, how many calls are you on? Realistically, you should be swipe up. You should be swiping up to X out of the call, right? That should be... I'm a bit stunned. How many calls has Ben Shelton on is my question. It can't be that many.
How many phones has he ever used in his life?
And if they are using it, they're using hands-free. Come on, let's be serious here.
Do you think Ben Shelton has ever used a
rotary phone? No.
I've never seen one.
I don't think so. Not at all. Not at all. Okay.
His butler wouldn't give him one. Oh, come on.
I don't think we covered. We mentioned Naomi Osaka's coming back, which is huge news, but she's not the only one next season.
Wait, what are you talking about?
Emma Raducanu says she's coming back after a quote unquote long hiatus.
Yeah, she was quoted during the course of the week, wasn't she? Where she was chatting about how she's on track effectively to come back and feeling like her body is, she's on course in effect, that her pathway to being able to play tennis again and feel good and confident about everything is she's heading in the right direction towards it. Strange, isn't it? In the space of a couple of years, and even strange in the course of this season, how she's one of the biggest names in tennis. I think certainly the UK, right? She's an incredibly well-known celebrity in that regard. It is kind of remarkable how much she's fallen into the background during the course of this season, and how, honestly, I'd kind of forgotten about her, which is, I think, a fairly sad state of tennis, is that how quickly it moves on.
I have a random theory that, like, the success of the England women's soccer team and, like, the stars that they had on that side and Raducanu's kind of fall back into the background has helped kind of push her down the hierarchy in the UK sports world when it comes to women athletes at this moment. And maybe it'll come back. And I saw there was some marketing stuff she was doing on an educational sense, which sounds like her appeal is still pretty wide, that people are willing to or wanting her to do these things. But yeah, I'm fascinated to see what happens next. Like, just watching very different situation, but watching someone like Sofia Kenin really have to rebuild it all, it's a daunting task. Takes a long time.
Maybe that is actually a good comparison for Raducanu to watch what Sofia Kenin has done to see the trajectory of the respective careers.
Yeah.
I think Raducanu is probably a better player and I think has a bit more firepower than Sofia Kenin does across the board. But they may be famous last words. 2024 will tell when it comes to that.
I got a couple more, Bush, before we get to two challengers remaining. Have you seen this Rybakina seed gate issue? The buy issue for the tournament coming up in Tokyo?
I have not. Please inform me.
So Iga Swiatek, Caroline Garcia, Maria Sakkari, Jess Pegula all get buys into the second round. They are the top seeds. Rybakina, who's the third seed, is not getting a buy, which is not cool with her. She posted on Instagram saying they changed the rules last minute. I have seen other players, though, post that they had changed the rules beforehand. I guess what this means is like it's based on your current form. So you had to have been successful at the last few tournaments to secure this buy, no matter what your seeding is. So even though Rybakina is third, she didn't get this, but she is not pleased once again with the WTA, Bush.
That is some like liberal think tank level of understanding of how this policy should work. Goodness me. Let's make the most convoluted nonsense just to try and solve it.
It's never a good sign when the people themselves are like, what? What are you talking about?
What is going on here? Dev, I've got a very simple solution to this. Now stay with me here. No buys.
No buys.
No buys. Okay.
No buys. It's bold, but I like it. Okay. There was that. And then there was the WTA will be spending $14 to $15 million out of pocket reportedly to construct a temporary 4,000 seat stadium in Cancun to be used for the 2023 finals, according to Gustavo Santiscoy, tournament co-director at WTA Guadalajara. Seems bad. Also seems like all those people saying that the WTA kind of bottled this by having it there might not have been wrong, Simon. Because I don't know, to do this for a temporary seat stadium, to shell out that amount of cash, I feel like that could go a few different places.
I mean, F the haters on this one, Dev. We're giving our full backing and support to this tournament. Think of where this could have gone.
That's true.
Think of where this could have ended up. And even better, to make this even better, we should make our own voyage down there. We have the time.
It's true.
It'll be nice weather.
I'm planning to go to Mexico in December, so maybe I...
Damn right. And you know where you'll be going? The WTA final.
Yeah, exactly. Just saying though, guys, we got a 1,000 event in Guadalajara already. They really wanted to have it in Czechia. We probably could have done that without doing this. But yeah, I can now understand why some people were quite cheesed off by these deliberations. But finally, Simon, my last point. I saw this on Tennis Reddit. It made me think far too much. But question for you. Has Daniil Medvedev surpassed the career of his fellow world number one-time slam winner and 5-time slam finalist, Andy Roddick?
That's a really good question.
Right? It made me, because initially I was about to say, assuredly, yes, he has passed Roddick based on who he beat in his one slam win. Because I think that to me will give Med a feather in his cap that few others can touch in the one slam crew. Unlike maybe your Del Potros are included in there as well, but there's a reason why.
I think it's currently pretty close, would be my guess on this one. And I think if you ask me this question again in 2 years, it won't be close. That's kind of where I'm leaning at the moment.
I'm with you, and we'll leave it there. Okay, 2 challengers remaining, Bush. I will go first. I've been reading a book, American Fire by Monica Hess. I think it came out in 2018, but it's about these arson attacks in a county in Virginia that ranged into like the 60s, and it was a wild story. This book is such a page turner. I started it really recently, and I'm nearly done, and I can't stop thinking about it. But highly recommend it if you haven't read it. American Fire, Monica Hess, arson, love story, the Rust Belt. Capitalism, it's got it all.
What a review. That sounded like a the summarization of the end of a Twitter review at that point.
Exactly.
Overall, 9 out of 10. Fuck capitalism. There you go. That's the end of the review. I guess to follow on from that quite smoothly, I think my two challenged remaining is, or challenged remaining. Still can't quite work out the verbiage of that one. Either way, Spain women's football team. I feel like we haven't really talked about it on this show. I feel like that is a story that has captured the sporting world's attention and the wider world's attention in general, especially just how brazen it was and how deeply both corruption, nepotism, sexism runs in the sport of football, and how unequal the two sports or the two disciplines inside of the same sport were inside of football, and how it consistently is still trying to fight for rights and equal prize money and equal status and everything that comes with it. I think it's been both a incredibly positive and an incredibly sad week all in the same breath when it comes to that story, because we've seen some traction, we've seen some movement, but realistically in the grand scheme of things, we've taken probably a gigantic leap backwards from a perspective.
Yeah.
And then at the same time started edging back forward again, which I think we're moving in a more positive direction. And I think in general, there will be a lot of people and a lot of young girls and a lot of women who have seen this story and will feel more empowered because of it. But by God, Dev, it was a bleak time to get here.
100% agreed. I was trying to think of like silver linings, and I mean there aren't many, but I do feel like these women being elevated into the stratosphere that they have been in terms of icons, not just in Spain but around the world, is pretty impressive. And I think like Jenny Hermoso is probably in the same name level category as Brandy Chastain, which I think is like a pretty huge deal in terms of recognition and importance and stature in the game, and the teams and the players showing their support. I think in that Spain-Sweden friendly, the players lined up together, and some of the players who had been boycotting had seen some of the more changes that the Spanish FA eventually made, and said this isn't the end, and this is a turning point, and we have to keep going and continuing to decry the systemic discrimination. Like I cannot imagine how hard it is on them to shoulder all of these things, these multiple things at the same time as dealing with the ridiculous and boorish backlash that we've seen. Like, man, it's
bad, Dev.
Yeah, it feels like I mean, especially as men covering sports, like, holy shit, this is just the tip of the iceberg, and it became a big deal because they refused to let it go into the dark without its proper comeuppance, and I think that's the lesson.
Yeah, I think so as well. And I think it's one of those that having a light shined onto truly horrendous behavior, or for once actually a level of pseudo accountability for seeing things that are clearly not right inside of an organization, and seeing some level of repercussions occur for that is kind of nice. I think on the flip side of that, how many more organizations are there like this?
No, yeah.
That is just completely horrendous to the point where you're like, oh my God, can you imagine being a part of this? Can you imagine having to continually walk into the offices or, have calls or any of these absolute morons, these horrible, horrible individuals? So yeah, just both good and bad in the space of very, very short time.
Well said, and we'll leave it there. That is it for this week's Open Era. A reminder, we are on patreon.com/Open Era. Join us there, get the show ad-free, get it early on Sundays, plus join us on the Discord where we're chatting tennis, including the Laver Cup, all the time. We're also on Twitter, /x.com/Open Era Pod. Still tweeting or Xing a bit on there, whatever you call it. But probably not much longer. For producer Dylan on the ones and twos, and for Simon, thank you so much for listening to Open Era. We'll talk to you next week.